The topic of this screencast is going to answer two questions. First, we're going to ask, how did geography affect life in the colonies? And also, what were the effects of the French and Indian War? The four essential questions that you will copy down on loose leaf and then turn in and answer are: why did different economies develop in different regions of America? Why was slavery more widely used in the South? Why did the French-Indian War break out? And what were the results and effects of the French-Indian War? So a quick reminder and review. In the last screencast we talked about the fact that the earliest settlements by the English were by the coast on water. So we see down the coast of Massachusetts. This is because everybody is coming from England, which is thousands of miles across the Atlantic Ocean. So all of your supplies and people are coming in on ships. Over time, of course, the settlements, people started building cities, and these areas were too settled, so people would start to strike it out and walk further west, inland, away from the water. So differences in geography led to the development of different economies in America. Right? Think about weather. If it's cold somewhere, you're not going to be able to grow plants as long, so there's not going to be as much farming. Soil. Soil is the ground. Some areas have a lot of good soil, good for planting crops. Other areas have too many rocks or very thin soil, so you're not going to do as much farming in that place. And then, of course, access to water. So these differences in the climate and the geography, had a major impact on the ways of life and the things people did to make money in these early colonies. So the first group we're going to talk about is the New England colonies. The New England colonies are the northeasternmost portion of the United States. They are New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and Connecticut. They have a colder climate, longer, harsher winters. They have rocky soil, so it's not great for farming. For this reason, instead of making most of their money by farming, people in New England mainly had economies based on fishing, shipbuilding, trading with England, and if there were farms, they were very small and they were mostly for growing food for people to eat, not for sale. Also, an interesting thing about New England is that many of the small towns in New England would have what are called town meetings, and this is a way for people living there to meet and make decisions about their local problems. It was like a little form of government, and this was very unique to New England, and still today it happens. Here we see a picture of some shipbuilding happening in Maine. So that you want to think of New England, you think of trade. The middle colonies, this includes New York, New Jersey, Delaware, and Pennsylvania. These were very diverse colonies. You had people from many different religions, many different countries throughout the world, but mostly Europe. But you had Swedish and Dutch, English, Spanish people. It was very diverse colonies. They have a mixed economy because they have both rocky soil and good soil. So you do have farming, but you also have a lot of trading. Some major cities of the middle colonies are New York and Philadelphia, which was at the time the biggest city in the United States. And finally, the last region is the southern colonies. These include Maryland, Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia. If you know anything about the South or you've ever been there, you know that it is much warmer. So they have a warm climate, which means you can grow plants for a lot longer time. They also have fertile soil. So again, the soil is the ground, and fertile means that it can grow and support a lot of plants. So because they had a good climate for farming, you ended up with an economy here based on farming. So they had these large farms that are called plantations. And here we see kind of a picture. A plantation would generally have a really big building where the family who owned the land lived, and then you have all these smaller outbuildings where people who worked the land, often slaves, would work, and people who were enslaved would live. And then you see in this picture also, or painting, a small ship that would pick up goods and then take them back to be traded. On these plantations, you grew a lot of tobacco and rice, and later on cotton. And this economy is going to very quickly rely directly on the enslavement of people. So these colonies are relying totally on enslavement to make money. Remember, the whole reason for these colonies to exist is to make their mother country, England, wealthy. So when we talk about tobacco being made in the southern colonies, or corn being grown in the middle colonies, or lumber being cut down in New England, all of those goods would be used to send back to England to trade and make money. And this was all about making England wealthy. And England was becoming more and more wealthy thanks to this mercantilist system and its American colonies. They got greedy, and that's what starts the French and Indian War. England was not the only country in the world trying to make money off of colonies. France had colonies too. And as you can see by this map, this green area shows you all the areas that France controlled, and the orange area shows where England controlled. So they're going to fight a war. The French also had many Indian allies, Native American Indians, who helped them fight against the British, because the British were taking a lot more land than the French, so the Native American Indians did not want the British to win this war. The American colonies fought against the French in support of their mother country, Britain. So here we see a very early famous political cartoon, and it says, "Join or die." So in this, the American colonies are represented by a snake, and it's saying if we don't join up to fight the French, then each individual colony, South Carolina, North Carolina, Virginia, Maryland, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, New York, and New England would all be cut apart and destroyed. So your note on the French and Indian War is that it happened from 1754 to 1763. And we have the English versus the French, and France loses this war. So they lose all of their North American colonies, what will one day become the United States and Canada. This also leads to the Proclamation of 1763, and the heavy costs of fighting this war are going to cause England to need to raise money by taxation. And England is going to tax the colonies in order to pay for the war costs. The Proclamation of 1763 divided up the lands that were won by England and the colonies that they won in the French and Indian War. And what it did is it drew a line, and we kind of see it on this map, follow my cursor. It drew a line and said they didn't want any more colonists to go west of this line. They wanted to keep that area as an Indian reserve. The British did not want to cause more problems with the Native American Indians. However, the people who lived in these coastal colonies want to continue to spread into this land. So this is going to lead to some serious problems, right? And after the war, England needs to raise money to pay for the war. So the ways that governments raise money, as we know, is by passing taxes. The first tax that England passes for the colonists to pay is called the Stamp Act. So the Stamp Act in 1765 is a tax to raise money for the war debt, the money that Britain owes after fighting the war, to pay for the soldiers, to pay for the uniforms, to pay for the weapons. All that stuff costs money, and England needs to get money, and they say, hey, we fought to defend the colonies from the French and the Native American Indians, so the colonies need to pay up. But the American colonists did not want to pay this tax because they felt like it was unfair. They protested because they did not get to vote on the tax. The tax was passed by the government in England. So because the people in America did not get to vote for that government, they felt like that government did not have the right to tax them. This is a very important idea. And the way that Americans tried to fight this tax was by boycotting English goods. So they would not buy things from England. They would make things on their own. And this was a way to try to get back at England for their mercantilist policies. Instead of buying English clothing or English hats or whatever else, Americans decided we're going to make our own. And this idea that the government in England should not be taxing America, and that and that America can get by on its own without relying on England, is going to lead later on to major problems and eventually the American War for Independence. So now, go back, make sure you can answer these 4 essential questions, and don't forget to answer the multiple choice Regents questions that are below this screencast. Thanks for watching. Make sure to study these notes. We're going to have a quiz on this soon, and keep up the good work.